everyone. I'm Elena Surilov, the Associate Director of International Engagement at the Office of Alumni Relations. On behalf of Northeastern University and myself, I hope you and your families are staying safe and healthy during this turbulent time. Welcome to our first session of Raja Yoga Meditation, brought to us by Brahma Kumari's World Spiritual University. Each session works as a standalone experience or as a part of the whole series of 6 sessions, and you will explore the relationship with yourself, with others, and with our rapidly changing world. Let me provide you with a few updates from our university. As an institution, we continue our efforts in finding a cure for the COVID-19 disease and future virus outbreaks. As you may have heard, Northeastern has joined the Trinity College, Microsoft, Google, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as founding partner to stop the next pandemic before it starts. Year by year, we are growing our Northeastern family. More than 275,000 alumni live and work in 177 countries, served by 47 global alumni communities. We have operations in 8 locations. Boston is our main campus, Charlotte, North Carolina, Seattle, Washington, Silicon Valley, California, Toronto, Canada, San Francisco, California, Vancouver, Canada, and our last edition, Raw Institute in Portland, Maine. With all these locations in alumni 177 countries, our network is growing fast. I encourage our alumni and students to join NU Source, which is a complementary platform designed exclusively for Northeastern alumni, students, and community members around the globe to connect, expand, and grow their network. Before we proceed to our official program, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. Please keep your microphones on mute and video off during the program. We encourage you to type your questions in the Q&A section in the bottom of your screen. I also recommend that you put your view in Zoom on speaker view. There's a button on the right top corner of your screen to do this. Also, if not too much problem, it will be helpful to us to see your full names. To rename yourself, you can click on participants and hover over your name and click the More button. From there, you can click Rename and Update. Without further ado, I would like to turn the microphone to our Istanbul community leader, Hilal Orhan, graduated from the Moore McKim School of Business in 2003 with an MBA degree. Hilal has been leading the Istanbul community since its official launch in 2009 and proved to be a true Northeastern supporter. Hilal is the one who wanted to share her Brahma Kumari's experience with other constituencies. Hilal?
A very, very warm welcome from all the alumni in Turkey and from myself, from the capital of roses in Turkey. I graduated from Northeastern, but not yet from the Spiritual University of Life. And not that because I couldn't graduate it, no. It is because life continues and so does the teachings and learnings. And this was actually the vision I had in order to bring the 2 universities together and cultivate some relationship. And this is the program that you are going to enjoy. And so in this respect, last but not least, I would like to share a slogan that Spiritual University teaching cherish. It says, if not now, then never. Enjoy the program and very many thanks for joining today. Thank you. And over to Philippa now.
Thank you very much indeed, Hilal in Sparta, the Turkish chapter of the Northeastern University Alumni, and also to Yelena in Boston from the Alumni Program Office. Thanks to both of you for your introduction and also for your invitation to be part of tonight's event, Drawing Stability and Nourishment from Within. And it's a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us from whichever part of the world you are in today. It's great to have you as part of this event. My name is Philippa Blackham, and I'll be with you for this series of 6 programs, which will be taking place over the next 12 weeks. And when we first started planning tonight's session, we really had no idea of just how relevant the topic was actually going to be. Of course, we've got the US presidential election still going on, and obviously it's a very anxious time, not only for the residents of the US, but I think the whole world is watching on. Here in the UK as well, we've just today joined large parts of Europe in going into another national lockdown. So that's where we're at here. We've also had the National Health Service announce that we're on the highest level of alert because of the number of COVID cases that they're seeing coming through. So it really does feel that we're living through a time when stability in the outside world is actually quite hard to come by, and that we are now needing to learn how to connect with the stillness that lies within us. So how do we find that still point in the turning world, the eye at the center of the storm where there is this perfect calm? And how do we make a connection with that inner calm? Well, these are the kind of questions that we're going to be asking tonight. And we'll be exploring them together and hopefully coming up with some solutions. So this series has been put together with the support of practitioners of Raja Yoga meditation as taught by the Brahma Kumaris. And you're no doubt aware of the yoga, which is called Hatha Yoga, which is prevalent everywhere. And that's a form of practice which benefits the physical body. Well, Raja Yoga is a form of practice, but it benefits and really supports the mind. So it's really the yoga of the mind. And there's a lovely saying which I really like, which is that the body is constantly eavesdropping on the mind. So if you're feeling a tension, a knot of anxiety in your stomach, or a tightness in your chest, then there's a possibility that what you're feeling is actually a reflection of some state of anxiety that has its origins in the mind. And so what we're really looking to work on is a balance between mind and body, and that by really focusing on our thoughts, what's going on in our inner world, that can really bring about a calm that is reflected in the whole of our being. So like with the Hatha Yoga exercises, Raja Yoga can be practiced by anyone from any background, any walk of life. You don't have to have any particular beliefs in order to experience the benefits. And really it's a state of being. So it applies equally to each and every one of us. Now, for those of you who registered in advance of tonight's session through the NU portal, you may have been sent a series of self-reflective questions. And these were very much designed to get you starting to think along the lines of what we're going to be covering in tonight's session. If you haven't been sent those questions, then don't worry, we're going to be going through them again, but you may just want to get hold of a pen and a piece of paper so that you can jot them down when we bring them up on the screen in a little while. So grab yourself pen and paper, and you may find that handy as we go forwards in tonight's session. And just to recap as well what Yelena said, if you would like to ask any questions at all of our guests, of our panel, as we're going through the course of the session, then do please use your Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And that message will come through to us, and we'll try and deal with all the questions as the session goes through. Well, joining us to discuss our topic this evening are 2 people who have a huge amount of experience in their chosen fields of work. It's a warm welcome to Sarah Eaggar and to Judy Rodgers. There's Judy, just popped up. Welcome to you, Judy. You're joining us from New York State. And right. Sarah as well, joining us from London. Welcome to you. Thanks so much for being with us for this session. So Sarah, you're a newly retired consultant psychiatrist with over 30 years of experience of working with the UK's National Health Service. And throughout this time, you've not only been exploring the best ways of maintaining mental health for those who are struggling, but you've also been looking and trying to understand the mind in the context of the self and exploring this path of meditation. So really you're spanning two worlds of medicine and meditation, or to put that another way, silence and science. So that's quite an interesting span, which I'd like to explore in this session. And Judy, you've got many years experience in the field of media, having held executive positions with CBS, Fox Video, and New World Entertainment. You were the co-founder of Images and Voices of Hope, which was set up with the aim of really challenging some of the ways in which the media operates, in particular setting out to kind of harvest and also foster a new narrative within the media, which can be both inspirational and also restoring a sense of justice and how we see ourselves and how we see the world around us. And Judy has done this in the context of her own journey into the world of meditation as well. So we're in very safe hands with both of you, and thank you so much for being with us. Judy, if I can just start with you, because obviously the thoughts of the whole world have been with the US these last few days. And, you know, here we are now in the beginning of November, and what a year it's been. We've had the whole COVID, we've had the aftermath of what happened with the Black Lives Matter movement. And now with a presidential election that is really taking people to the edge. Do you get a sense in the US of how people are really holding up with this level of anxiety and where people's stress levels are at now?
Well, thank you, Philippa. How are people holding up? I think people in the US are pretty stressed. But, you know, I think it's more than stress. I think it's the uncertainty, because nothing's holding still. As you said about COVID and elections, it's all in flux. And so to keep the mind still when the outside world is constantly fluctuating is really the challenge. And that's why I think tonight's program, tonight for you, this afternoon for me, is so relevant, because the uncertainty has become epidemic.
And that's become, in a way, part of our new normal, hasn't it?
That's right.
And you're talking to us from a retreat center in the Catskill Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Are you and the community that you work with finding that there are more and more people now reaching out to places which can help bring about a sense of stability and calm? Is there an increased uptake in that?
There definitely is, but like you, we can't, you know, we're limited as to what we can do in person. So we're doing a lot on the phone, we're doing a lot on Zoom. People are really, really anxious. And it's not just COVID, it's not just the elections. It seems that everyone on a personal level is dealing with loss and anxiety. So I think the bottom line, in terms of if there's one message that I would say that we are speaking with people about, it's that if you're counting on the outside world to cheer you up or make you feel safe, then it's the wrong strategy, right, at this time. You know, we were used to, we'd go to Starbucks, or we'd go to the mall, or we did whatever we did, right? It depends on your kind of method of choice, but we had habits of using the outside world to cheer ourselves up or make ourselves feel like we're a part of something and not isolated. But those strategies aren't working. And so I think what we'll probably talk about more than once this evening is what strategies are working. You know, if you can't count on the people you used to count on, or the things you used to count on, or the outings, or the favorite places and all that, how do you find firm ground? And so, yes, the calls to the retreat center are legion. the request, even for personal retreats, like we have a couple people starting personal retreats tomorrow, just people who have just found themselves really needing a break. And so in some ways, we have to be able to give ourselves that break.
Absolutely. And of course, you're talking about people being thrown back on their own resources as the various props that they may have had in their lives, one by one being taken away. But for many people, those inner resources aren't necessarily there to rise up and meet them and support them. And so the cracks are beginning to show for many people. I mean, Sarah, you're working in the field of mental health, and I know that there have been quite a few reports coming out recently looking at the way in which people's mental health is beginning to suffer. More than 2/3 of adults in the UK are now reporting feeling somewhat or very worried about the effect that COVID is having on their life, with young adults and women disproportionately being affected. What's your sense of how people's mental health is now, and how do you see that panning out in the future? Because I know some providers are already saying that they are unable to meet the demand even now. How is this going to play out?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Philippa. It's and Judy, it's a time when people are being thrown back on their own internal resources. And it was interesting, there was something recently saying, I think a book has come out recently about Holocaust survivors and how it was the people who had good coping skills beforehand who did the best. And in a sense, those people who had already been through tough times and had some resilience, in a sense, they knew how to survive tough times. And a lot of it, for a lot of us, we've had a pretty good time. And so it might be a big shock to us that we're losing, as Judy said, those internal supports. So we may, huge one, be losing our job. Just the unemployment figures are very scary. Losing connections with people, losing the ability to do the things that helped us really keep our body and soul together, that helped us maintain our mental health. So it is this crisis is in the context of a lot of losses. And in a sense, unlike a war where you have a sort of common enemy, or you can band together, you can meet up on the street or somehow help support each other, even in these COVID times, it's harder because you're being separated from each other. So I think that idea of being really thrown back on your own resources is really what it's about. And I think, again, in a recent Washington Post article, it was saying that the interest in all the mindful meditation apps has gone through the roof. I think the subscription to all those has increased, 1,000%. And so people are sort of realizing that I need to learn some skill that helps me calm myself down. I need to be able to go to a place inside that is safe when everything else outside is not very safe. I need to be able to know where those resources lie within me. And I think that's an interesting question, and I think one we'll explore for the rest of today's session, because sometimes turning within is quite scary for people. It's not a place they're familiar to visiting, and there may be experiences or traumas that make it feel even more unsafe. So I think this practice of meditation, the art of going within, of being able to look at my fears, of being able to find a safe place within, that's what this journey of meditation is about, or mindfulness, or all these kind of strategies that people are now turning to because of the uncertainty and difficulty with relying on anything external. So I think people are looking more and more to faith groups, to self-help type processes, because they can see that the National Health Services, whichever country you're in, they are going to be overwhelmed to some extent. And so this sense of, I think the same with exercise. People now are realizing that we need to physically keep ourselves in good shape, and if we can't get to the gym, we jolly well need to go for a walk outside or do whatever we need to do to keep the body really working as best it can. And it's the same for our minds. We need to be able to give it a diet, a nourishing diet of soothing and calming and positive thoughts and ideas that are really going to allow us to stay on that even keel. Anyway, that's for
And of course, for
starters.
many, yeah, no, that's, I mean, that's great. And of course, for many people, as Judy was saying, what they have done to de-stress or find joy in their life has been taken away from them, whether that be going to the theatre, going to the cinema, going to a music concert, or even just being part of a community. And that whole sense of belonging and sense of purpose that we get from socializing. And we've now got this language of social distancing, which is slowly seeping in and making people feel separate and distanced. So before we go too much further, let's just bring up onto the screen the self-reflective questions that I talked about earlier, that were sent out in advance to those who registered through the NU portal. These are the questions that people have been thinking about in advance of this session. I think Yelena is going to bring them up on the screen now, but let me read them for you. The first question: we all move through different experiences of ourselves according to different situations. So this is a recognition that, you know, different parts of our life bring out different parts of our personality, but within that, which do we feel most comfortable with? Which is the real me, and what situation am I most experiencing my true self? The second question: when times are tough, what helps you restore a sense of stability? So that's touching on this point that Sarah was just making, that we need to know where our safe place is within ourselves, where our happy place is within ourselves, where we can feel connected, and we can return to that whenever we want to. So what for you represents a sense of stability that you can maintain? And then the third question: what does the term inner awareness mean to you? Inner awareness. So that's lovely, Yelena. Thanks for bringing that slide up. So we're going to just have a little practice of inner awareness, because I thought it was nice quite early on in our session, because we've all come from so many different experiences, just to have a practice of stilling our mind and bringing ourselves right here into this moment that we're all sharing together. So Sarah, if you can lead us in that practice. I might just mention that here in the UK tonight is bonfire night. So it's the night when people traditionally let off all their fireworks and generally make a lot of noise. So if you do hear any explosions, don't be alarmed. It's just firework night going off. I think there's a display happening right where my house is, so you might hear some sounds, but don't be alarmed. It's just bonfire night. So Sarah, if you could just talk us through and bring us to a place of stillness, so that we can really experience that before we start talking any further.
Okay, so what I would like to do now, just for the next 5 minutes, it's quite short, is just do a little exercise which I call coming closer. And so it's a way of coming into the present moment and then getting closer and closer to my inner awareness. And I'm going to use my trusty little bowl to ring us in, and then I'll play it at the end to ring us out. So I'd like you to sit comfortably with your eyes closed or half open, whatever feels good for you. Just take a few deep breaths. Just begin by noticing any sounds that are in your environment. You may hear some fireworks if you're here in the UK, or noises from nature or traffic. What are you noticing? What are you hearing? And then just bringing yourself a little closer still, becoming aware of your body and where you hold on to any tension. Do you need to drop your shoulders? Let your arms and legs relax. Again, just noticing, where am I holding on to any tension in my body? And as I breathe in, breathing in, relaxation, and as I breathe out, just letting go of any tension. And coming a little closer still, noticing that gentle rhythm of my breath. Breathing in and breathing out. How this in itself is a soothing, rhythmic process. And then coming a little closer still and noticing, how am I feeling right now? What feelings are arising within me? I might be a bit tired or tense, or enjoying being here in this call, or things from the day are lingering with me, just noticing how I'm feeling. And then looking at my mind and any thoughts that are going through my mind. A little bit like standing on the side of a stream, on a riverbed, and just watching those thoughts pass by. Are they racing thoughts or worried thoughts or neutral thoughts? And then going deeper still, closer in, just dropping down beneath my thoughts and feelings. I might notice between or underneath those thoughts, there is a place of quiet, a stillness, a peace. And I go deeper still, dropping into that well of stillness. And this place at the center of my being feels safe, feels peaceful, and loving. And when I find this place, it's like I can just let go, like floating in an ocean of peace. Feeling loved, feeling safe, feeling calm. And then gradually I can travel back out, watching my feelings and thoughts, my breath, my body, and opening my eyes and becoming aware of the world around me.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah, for that dive into an experience of stillness. It felt very important that we actually had an experience of something that we're going to be talking about early on in our session. And if you're listening to this from wherever you are, you may have just noticed how easy or hard you found it to allow yourself to follow those thoughts and find that place of stillness within. And you may have had an experience. If so, you can jot that down on your piece of paper. It's good to sort of chart these experiences. But Judy, it was interesting that we had that image of light on the screen for quite a few minutes, which is something in mainstream media you would just never get, you know, to have one image that doesn't change for such a long period of time. And of course, you've worked in the industry for many years. And I wonder how you feel our sense of identity, our sense of self, our sense of inner connection has been affected by the amount and the type of media that we all consume these days.
Gosh, Philippa, you probably know the answer to that question better than I do. You having been in media as well. I mean, I think when you're in media, there is this assumption that what people want is only novelty, right? They want the most recent, most surprising, maybe even the most disturbing thing that happened, and they want a lot of that. So if one disturbing thing happened, but then the next day another disturbing thing happened, then they now want that. There's this assumption. And in media, I also felt over those years that we were counting all the time. We were counting box office receipts. We were counting magazine subscriptions. We were counting Nielsen ratings, right? Everything was about counting. but we never ask the question, what is the impact on those who are experiencing this media? Especially in the US, I felt that this was our biggest export, bigger than defense, was all of the news and soap operas and all of that we were shipping overseas, as well as showing in the US. And yet no one was really asking what happens to people when they experience these things. And so, and I'm definitely not anti-media. Media's, it's our, it's in our groundwater. So it's not about that. But over the 20 plus years that I worked with people in media on this subject, what I was saying to them, and we were talking about together, was, to choose to work in media is a calling. It's not just a job. When you say, yes, I'll show up and this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to develop narratives for the public space. I'm going to develop stories and narratives and images for people in the public space. A part of that is asking what is it that they want? What is it that they need? What is it that will serve? And in the same way that long ago we started holding business accountable. You wouldn't let a big industrial site be built in the lot next to you. You wouldn't let a big garbage truck pull up and dump everything in the yard next door. Same thing, right? You wouldn't want your media providers to bring toxic things into your home through your screens. So we started asking, a few questions. One is, what is your personal mission and your social impact that you want to have? Why did you go into this? Why did you decide I wanted to be a producer or a cameraman or a magazine writer and editor? And then what is the contribution you want to make? So to really shift the whole question into a question about service, because honestly, at this time in the world, with all the things that are going on, everybody in some way has to be in service to the public good. And so I feel like there are people in media who are really doing powerful, meaningful work and bringing us really valuable things. And I think as the public, I think what the viewing public or the listening public can do is, when we see that someone has created something really powerful, really moving, really meaningful, let them know. I'm a believer. You write to the editor, you write to the paper, you say, I love that, so that they have a sense of what the public is looking for. It's really important right now that we, let me just tell one short story. So we had been at this for a while, and then in 2012, there was a big tragedy that happened in the US, and I'm sure it would have gotten notice abroad, which is that a disturbed young man walked into an elementary school and shot over 27-year-olds. And this was in Newtown, Connecticut, which is actually near where I am now. And the editor of the town paper, it tells this story that, all the news trucks came into the town, et cetera, and they're sticking microphones in front of the parents. And, the town is in an upheaval. And he said, I was asking myself, what is the role of the community newspaper? What could we do? We're not CNN. We're not, the New York Times. And he said, I felt we had to write a redemptive narrative. So the town was not forever the saddest place in the world. So I called one of our board members and I said, what do you think? Redemptive narrative? And he said, well, what about restorative narrative? So we started working in 2013 on this genre that we call restorative narrative. And the idea is that when these things happen, and now they happen a lot, you do have to tell the bad story. You can't gloss it over. People want to know what happened. But your narrative arc that you follow is the arc of recovery, the arc of restoration. 80% of people have a resilient personality. They score on a test about resilience. 80% of the people will score as being able to get back up and even having growth from that. So when the media follows that story, the story of recovery, the story of restoration, the story of renewal, which we all know, we've all experienced that, then we've got a different dialogue going on in the public space. And that's what I think has to happen right now. We have to have a
That's a fantastic,
disability. Yeah.
yeah. That's such a lovely vision. And I think what you're saying about the question you were asking people in the media around, you know, what is it you're doing with your work? I think that has crept into many people's work nowadays, that it's not enough to just do a job and get paid for it. You want to work in something that somehow reflects your values. You want to feel that what you're doing is somehow making a difference to the world, because the world is in such a state of need. There is a strong feeling of wanting to do something. And yet when it comes to bringing in a spiritual message, trajectory within that narrative, very often there are blockages to that, because we live in a world that is so bound up with the physical.
Yeah.
That sees the physical world as something there for us to exploit, that sees other people as things that we can use or even exploit. We even do the same to ourselves. And yet to try and push beneath that surface of the physical to this quality of experience that we've all just shared in Sarah's beautiful meditation. Certainly for me, working in the media, that was often seen as being not safe ground to go on, and it was kept to one side. I mean, I'd like to come to Sarah in a moment because she's also navigated this question, but just very briefly, Judy, do you have experiences of bringing together this spiritual experience and combining it with your professional experience? Have you ever managed to do that?
Well, let me answer the question in two ways. One is in terms of the spiritual creeping into public media. The movie that I think really captured it was Welcome to My Neighborhood, about Fred Rogers. Now, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was a children's show, right? But he was an ordained minister. And that film really powerfully deals with both the realities of people's anxiety and anger, but also there's a moment in that film where he explains what is racism to the children. And the mailman comes. The mailman is a person of color. He has the mailman sit next to him. He washes the mailman's feet in his little swimming pool, and he's saying to the children about this mailman. Now that is spiritual, right? You're not talking about religion, but you're talking about values. You're talking about serenity, etc. In my own life, I would just say this. I don't think that we can change our worldview if we don't have a reflective practice. I think that we will find ourselves just reacting and being shocked and being upset and being horrified. And it's not until you have some reflective practice. It doesn't have to be Raj Yoga, which we're talking about a little more today, whatever your practice is, but you have the ability to step back, as Sarah led us through, to go inside, to notice what's going on in my heart. You know, if my heart's filled with anguish or blame or guilt, if my mind is racing all the time, then what could possibly be the quality of my contribution? So to learn how to use your inner space as the ground from which to consider, how can I make things work better, whether it's in my work or in my family or just in the self.
This feels like such a valuable conversation because, you know, we've had debate and dialogue brought into the public domain around issues of race and gender and equality. But in a way, talking openly about spiritual experience is possibly the last threshold that we have to cross over. And I know for you, Sarah, working as a meditation practitioner and also a consultant psychiatrist, this is an edge that you have navigated for 30 odd years. And I wonder what stages you went through in owning that part of yourself in your place of work, and how you've seen the attitudes change over the years. Is it now something that we can freely say, yeah, I had an amazing experience in which I felt deeply connected to myself and saw everyone in the world as part of my human family? You know, is that something that really happened for you in your place of work, that you could be that open?
Interesting
Sarah,
question, Philippa. Yes. I would say you know, I started meditating when I was still at medical school, so it was a little bit fashionable, but not in those circles. And I would say for a long time I kept my faith community and the spiritual aspects of my life really quite separate from my professional life, although people would always pick up on it in the canteen, you know, when you weren't eating the chicken or the sausages or whatever. It's interesting how food is where we sort of notice people's habits. But I have noticed a huge change, and in my own profession as a psychiatrist, and I think we've talked about this before, one of a major initiative which was really helpful was when we started up a spirituality special interest group at the Royal College of Psychiatrists. And I'm actually at the moment just revising a chapter on assessing patients' spiritual needs. So I can see that in the 10 years or so since that was first written, the amount of literature now about this, about patients talking about their need to have their spirituality acknowledged. To really understand someone, you need to know what their values are, what their beliefs are, what's important to them. And these are the kind of questions that you should really be asking of your patients if you really want to know them as fellow human beings and what makes them tick. And I guess the last frontier, and again, I've had conversations with some of my colleagues about this, is that relationship with a higher power or a supreme being or God or universal love or whatever name you want to put on it. But so many people in the world have a sense that they have a connection with something that's beyond them, something greater than them, something transcendent. And yet there's a feeling to talk about that is a no-no. You know, to talk about that puts you in the kind of doolally camp. And I think people are feeling more and more that needs to open up, and we need to be able to speak about the importance or the reality of that relationship. And there are quite a few user-led organizations now, a Spiritual Emergency Network, Hearing Voices Network, Emerging Proud Network, where people who are having these kind of transformative experiences do not want them to be pathologized and want to be able to speak about them openly. So you can see a groundswell of people really wanting to look at this aspect of their existence and have it acknowledged as being valid and important to them. And I think for myself personally, what I've realized more and more, one is how you make sense of being a human being. How do you make sense of consciousness, of how the brain works, how we process our feelings, our thoughts? To me, it's never made sense unless I really included the spiritual dimension. For me, that answered a lot of, if you like, theoretical questions or my understanding of what it means to be a human being. But moreover than that, I think it's this thing of in your practice, and the more you're in the presence of people who are suffering, in the presence of people who are distressed, what is it that helps them? Of course, you have your skills and your knowledge as a doctor, but it's something about your presence and what we might call embodied presence. And so the meditation practice, your own spiritual understanding, is the thing that's really enabled me to stay with people who are in pain, that's enabled me to really go deeply into compassion and compassionate presence and be with my own pain and my own distress and learn how to comfort and soothe myself in those situations. And therefore, when I'm around others who are going through the same thing, it gives you that strength, that resilience to stay with it and to really be of use, hopefully, because you're not falling in a heap. You're actually strong within yourself. So I think on all those levels, the journey of spirituality and my professional life has been absolutely fascinating and very, very rewarding.
It is interesting to chart the changing attitudes. I actually watched a news report just yesterday or the day before, where in the news bulletin, the words meditation and mindfulness were used as being things that were helping people get through. And I thought that was very interesting. And, you know, historically, if we look at people who have begun some kind of spiritual inquiry, it's very often come after they have experienced something in their life that has acted as a trigger for that inquiry. It could be the death of someone that they love. It could be a loss in their life. It could be an encounter with ill health. And they start to go deeper within themselves. And in a way, you could see this whole kind of global COVID experience as a global trigger for really going more deeply and asking deeper questions about ourselves. So it feels like a discussion whose time has really come. But I'd like to ask you, Judy, in terms of when we do start to look within ourselves, what are the range of qualities and experiences that we might make contact with? And how do we know when we're just in touch with our ego? How do we know when we're in touch with, maybe you could use the word higher self, or an essential part of ourself? What are the different things that we're experiencing as we bring our thoughts and turn them within?
Well, that inner territory is, it's different with different people, right? You know, it needs to be a safe place. We need to be able to go inside and not come running, screaming out because it's so dark or so uncomfortable. So we do have to do some work inside. And I think one of the easiest points of entry is the heart, because I think for many people in the world, our hearts have been broken. You know, many things break our hearts. And I know you can actually feel your heart break. I remember times in my life when I would say I actually knew my heart was breaking. So the heart stores things. You know, the heart stores, and I'm not speaking here medically, I'm talking about what we as human beings experience, right? When something very sad happens, or very upsetting, or very scary, or worrisome happens, especially when we're kids, the heart holds it, and it holds it the way it took it in. So if I was 3 or 4, the thing that might not have even noticed at 20 may have been terrifying at 3 or 4, and I would hold it that way. So one of the places that I think the inner work really begins to help is learning how to kind of clean the heart. How to, I have met people who are holding guilt over things 30 years, something they did 30 years ago, that a mistake they made that they felt was unforgivable, or blame. I was so harmed by this. I can never get over it. I can never forgive this person. I can never get over it. All these things that people hold in their hearts really create a real heaviness inside. And so when you engage in a meditation practice, part of what you're doing is you're cleaning the heart. You're learning how to let things go. And even things that were really hard, even if you were really wronged, you know, you begin to understand that holding those things is actually blocking you from your true self, or from any deeper, wiser, bigger connection. The other thing is the mind. You know, the mind races. It races all the time, grabs things. It's very outward oriented. And so getting the mind to slow down and slow down and slow down, which Sarah did for us so nicely, until finally the mind comes to a stop and it's cooperating with us. So you begin to notice, the more you go inside, you begin to notice that there is a landscape inside. You know, we're holding feelings, we have these thoughts, there is even buried, there is this kind of higher part of ourself, you referred to it as the high self, that actually has a lot of nuance. you know, about what is good for us and bad for us, what's moral, what's immoral, what serves, what doesn't serve. That discerning part that for many of us has just gone to sleep because we haven't checked in with it in so long. So when you begin to turn inside and you begin to study this kind of what you call the mystic arts, right? The spiritual terrain, you begin to see that some of the things you had accepted as permanent in your life, like I'm a worrier, or she's just sad, you know, she's just kind of a heavy-hearted person, don't need to be that way. We don't need to go the rest of our lives as a worrier or as someone who carries heaviness. So you begin to see that knowing this self is really, to me, it's not like a nice to have, it's a have to have. I don't know how people navigate right now without some reflective practice that takes them inside and lets them find that still place that Sarah was talking about. Otherwise, where do you get your reserve? Where do you get your recovery from if you don't have that?
I think you've touched on such an important point here, which is that for many people, they avoid silence, they avoid going into stillness because what comes up is their pain.
Right.
They're confronted with their unresolved pain, possibly their unresolved trauma. And you could say that collectively as humanity, we're carrying pain and trauma, and we try and escape from it. We try and get away from it. Sarah, if I can ask you, there's a question that has come in on the Q&A, and don't forget, please do write your questions on the Q&A if you'd like to feed into our discussion. The question is, what's the difference between psychology and spirituality? And I guess the question could also be, what is the difference between our thinking, which is connected to the brain, and our being, which is connected to the soul and connected to the spirit? And if I can feed in as well this question from Judy about, you know, what do we do when we're confronted with that pain that can feel overwhelming, and the instinct is there to just suppress it, to take some substance or whatever to make it go away? How do we navigate that territory in order to get to the good stuff that is possibly beyond those painful, difficult feelings? So that's kind of two questions in one there. But how would you steer us in that?
Psychology and spirituality. I guess psychology is a lot of psychology does bridge that, you know, that there are psychologists who realize there's something else, not just our behavior, not just how our brain works, but there's another dimension. And there are a lot of psychological things that are very spiritually orientated. And it all begins really on what your model of being a human being is. And if you feel that you are just your brain and your chemicals going around in your brain, and in some ways you're just being, your behavior is a product of that, it really leaves out a whole huge realm of human experience. And so for me, when I understood it's this question also of consciousness, like who is having the experience, who is watching the thoughts, who is having the feelings. There's nothing in brain science that really explains the gestalt of that whole integrated experience we have, which we might call awareness of me as a being. And so understanding that being is more than just the outcome of chemical interactions in my brain, that there's another quality of transcendence. And within that transcendence, there are many, many resources. As Judy was saying, there's a whole treasure trove of experiences which I might not access if I'm just really looking at myself in this moment in time or this set of experiences. And so this journey within allows us to discover that apart from all the things that may have happened to me on the outside in this life, inside there are resources of love, of compassion, of peace. And these events that have happened more recently or even as a child may be blocking that. And so how do we get through into this treasure trove or this room of wonder? It's by letting go of those experiences and really tuning and choosing to tune into that deeper experience of peace and of love. And in some senses realizing, and through experience understanding, that that is our true nature, that there's a lot more to us than meets the eye, if you like. So the word psychology, actually, psyche means soul. And so it's trying to literally understand how the soul works. But spirituality is including a transcendent quality, another aspect to our existence, which psychology might not necessarily capture. And I always tell people that just do it as an experiment. In a sense, I remember when I started meditating, I would sit there and I think nothing's happening, or you know, I'm not doing this right, or this is a, you know, this is nothing. But I just sort of stuck with it. And I realized it was a bit like riding a bicycle. I kept going through the process, through the practice. And then one day I just suddenly found myself somewhere else. And I couldn't even quite tell you how I got there. And it reminded me of that moment, you know, when your dad lets go of the bike and you suddenly you realize you're riding it. So it was that kind of feeling of getting to know the journey, getting to understand that journey inwards, and being able to access it more readily. And that's through experience, that once you start to touch a deep feeling of peace that's underneath everything else, or that real feeling of my true self as just love, and that's like my real identity. And it might almost be like a practice of when, you know, as if we were dying in a way, like I'm leaving everything behind, and what am I left with? And you talk to people who are dying and they will say that what is the most important thing they're left with? It's the love that they take from others, and it's the love that you carry in yourself, and that you are, in fact. And so, you know, sometimes they call the practice of meditation dying alive, or, you know, dying daily. There's something about just being able to let go of all those other identities, my job, my relationships, everything that I think defines me in some way, and really know that at my core, this is what I am: peaceful, loving energy. And that's my safest place, and that's my truest place. And once you can do that, those things like ego and the labels and having to prove myself, it's much easier to let go of those things. And really, that's when the happiness grows as well. You know, you feel that your existence is not based on all these things that are going to be taken away from you, or that you could lose, or that are going to hurt you in some way. And it's like your world opens up, and you're seeing things not just in this two-dimensional space, but in a 3 or 4-dimensional space. So it's a really important discovery to make about yourself and your own existence. I hope that's answered.
It sounds like, no, it has. And it sounds like the journey, although initially and maybe ongoingly, involves looking at aspects of ourselves that we might try and push to the side, that if we engage with that and bring it into a place of healing, that we can move through it, if you like, to a place of calm, a place of stillness that lies beyond that. And, you know, if you look at our human experience, I think, you know, each and every one of us will have had a moment when we have connected into a greater part of ourselves, whether that be standing looking at a beautiful sunset on the ocean and feeling an awe of the, you know, the beauty of nature, or whether it be holding a newborn baby and feeling that real innocence and purity and that freshness, and it somehow mirrors something in ourselves and we experience something in ourselves. Or for many people, it could be, you know, going to a match and their team winning scoring the winning goal and that moment of kind of euphoria that they touch into, that all these experiences in a way are like gateways to an inner world that is part of our experience, that we only touch in fleetingly in our everyday lives, but with practice we can learn to access that beautiful part of ourselves whenever we want to. Judy, is that something that you would recognize, and would you say that you've got to a place where you can call up that emotion, that connection to love and the purity of the child, and experience that whenever you want? Is that a part of what you would say you do experience?
Yeah, you explained that nicely. You know, Philippa, I think it depends on what state I'm in when I come to sit and meditate. And I try to make sure that I try to keep some of the outside world at bay at this point. You know, I'm not just opening the gates and letting whatever's out there come flooding into my eyes and my mind and my heart. I kind of pick what comes in so that I'm not rattled when I sit to meditate. But what you're describing, you know, the ability to that euphoria that you've picked up on it's sometimes elusive. You know, sometimes the journey to that feeling of lightness and euphoria takes you through some uncertain territory. And I think you have to have a lot of trust in the self, that you are at root loving and peaceful and beautiful, and that whatever's happened on top of that, whatever distressing memories or experiences are on top, that they're not really you, that those are distractions, and that this place you're on your way to is really you. And so I think you move in there with that certainty and that trust. And as you do that, it's like you're in a familiar boat that you trust, and you're moving down a river and you're going home. You know, the journey to yourself is a journey home, because when you get there, you realize this really is who I am. You know, beyond being a mother or father or a psychologist or a journalist or whatever, beyond being a citizen of a certain country, etc., this home, this place where you are just you, the truth of who you are, that love that Sarah talked about. When you're there, when you arrive there, it is a state of profound peace and acceptance. And you know, not only are you okay, but that everything's going to be okay. It's very reassuring.
And we're also talking tonight about nourishment from within. And we're used to thinking of nourishment as being something that we get from the outside. We have nourishment from the food we eat. We have nourishment from being in perhaps, you know, beautiful nature or a nourishing relationship. We would talk about that. How do you see nourishment as being something that can actually come from the inside?
Mm-hmm.
How do we connect with that?
Well, you know, I think we have to develop the ability. So there is a movie, there are a series of movies that run on the screen of the mind. And when you turn inside, you can see them, right? 1 minute there's a movie about politics. The next minute it's I have to go see my mother. The next minute it's I wonder if my kids are getting home on time, or something that happened in the past, and they just run. And so when you go to this question about where is the nourishment inside, you have to find that guy in the projection booth and turn the movie off, because he's running reruns, right? You've seen all those movies before. So you have to turn that movie off, and you have to invoke a movie that is beautiful, that is morally beautiful, that takes you to peace and love and grace and acceptance and kindness and compassion. And all of us have that inside. That is who we are. That is what you find when you get to the home, the true self. That's what's there. It's this beautiful space of absolute kindness and goodness, no matter who you are, no matter what mistakes you've made. So it's the ability to turn off those reruns. And this is where spiritual practice becomes necessary, because it's easy to say, turn off those old movies that are running. Not so easy to do if you've never tried to manage the thoughts that are rolling through the mind or the feelings welling up in the heart. So as you work with a spiritual practice, you're working with your ability to build the capacity to do that, so that you can put in the mind a high quality thought and let nothing else come. You know, every thought and feeling has a vibrational field. You know, we're energetic beings, so we create a field of energy around us. So if our thoughts are of anxiety and fear and worry, etc., we're just like a walking little thunderstorm, right? Whereas if I can quiet that stuff, if I can get those movies to stop, and I can bring forward one powerful thought, let's say it's kindness, and I'm able to hold this thought of kindness, the vibration of that begins to transform first what's going on inside and then everything around me. So it's actually quite profound, even though no one knows what you're doing. It's completely incognito. Someone could be sitting across from me and have no idea about, you know, how much effort I'm putting into this, or what the quality of work is that's going into this to get the mind to become stable and to get the heart to become quiet, and to pull forward this quality of thought that's going to bring benefit to me and to everyone around me.
Beautiful. Sarah, I know you've recently finished a book, which is really a sort of a toolkit of practical things that we can do to help us get to this place that Judy is talking about. It's a book called Stillness in the Storm, 7 tools for coping with fear and uncertainty, and it's a book that you've done in conjunction with the charity that you're the chair of, the Janki Foundation. So it's all going to charitable causes. But from the work that you did in compiling this book, what would you say came out as the top tips or the top tools for how we find the stillness in the storm and reach this place that Judy's talking about?
Well, interestingly, this book, I co-written it with Jan Alco, and it's been in the makings for a while. But of course, when the lockdown happened earlier this year, both Jan and I saw this as an opportunity to really spend some time finishing it off. And we went through several iterations, but it really echoes a lot of the themes that we've been talking about tonight. And so each chapter is going through ways of dealing with fear and uncertainty. And we start off by this idea of creating inner safety. So really, how do you create that space inside where you feel safe? And it uses visualizations, and again there are audio tracks with meditation commentaries and tips for how to start building that sense of a safe place inside. And then the next one was being present. So how do I bring myself into the present moment? And again, I think we've mentioned tonight about the journey within is sometimes, you know, not sometimes, it is confronting, and there will be aspects of ourselves which we don't necessarily want to look at or be with, but we don't want to avoid them or suppress them. So how can I really be present with myself, accept myself? And so again, some practices and tools to help us do that. Then a whole section on loving myself. And this is quite a challenge for many of us. As Judy said, some of the messages we got when we were younger, that there's something wrong with me, or I'm not such a good person, how they stick in our hearts. And so really having to tune into this capacity for compassion, which is really when love meets suffering. That's when compassion arises. And there's a very interesting exercise that you can do in a group, where you ask people, you know, you've got someone in front of you who's suffering, how are you responding? What are you saying? What are you doing? And people say, oh, I gave them a hug, I listened, you know, I stroked their hand, I told them it was going to be okay. And then you say, now you're suffering in some way. Now, how have you responded to yourself? And over 80% of people notice that they do not respond to themselves in the same way as they would to someone else who was suffering. And often there's that inner critic, there's a kind of harsh self-criticism, which is saying, oh, you're pathetic or you're weak or whatever. So just noticing that, noticing what's that inner dialogue, and then tuning into this capacity for compassion, which we know we all have. It's built in most, I'd say 99.9% of people, to care for other things, to care for our children, to care for other human beings, to really use that capacity to care for myself. And it's a big issue with healthcare practitioners, anyone in the field of service who are used to giving, doing. How much am I also using that same energy really just to look after myself and care for myself? So it's a whole big subject. And a lot of work's been done on this by Kristen Neff and Christopher Gomer, who set up the Mindful Self-Compassion Center. Then we look at stepping back and accepting. So again, it's that ability to just make a little bit of space between me and my thoughts and feelings. So often we feel that we are our thoughts and feelings. And that practice of meditation really helps us realize that I'm creating these phenomena. They are not me. And it's a bit like an artist who's making a painting. The artist doesn't think I'm the painting, or the artist doesn't think I'm the paints or the brushes. The artist knows they're creating it. And we've lost that ability to step back and see, actually, this is my creation. And I do have some choices, and I do have more control than I realize. So that's a very important thing. Empowering myself. We look at practices like forgiveness, gratitude, hope. And hope is really important. Again, just going back to that book I mentioned earlier, when they were looking at Holocaust survivors, they found that people who had faith did reasonably well, but it was the people who had hope who did the best. And it's that sense that the future will be okay. And I think that links into Judy's point of when you go home, when you get to that place, there's and in a sense, the bigger picture, you have a feeling that all will be well. And that is the greatest source of hope that you can have, even when, you know, things are apparently crumbling all around you. And hope is a very, very powerful feeling and motivator. Connecting with others, connecting with myself. Then we go really much deeper into this whole question of my spiritual identity, inner peace and wholeness. How do I discover that? And then looking at, when you put all that together, how is my resilience bolstered? How am I making myself strong on the inside? So hopefully it will be something that will be of use to a lot of people who are listening now, because it puts all these ideas into bite-sized chunks with tips and audio tracks and things that you can practice as you go along. So yeah, I hope it's of service to people on this journey within.
Fantastic. I'm sure it will be, and I know you've done a lot of work with healthcare providers in supporting them and doing the difficult job that they do, and a lot of that has fed into this book, which, let's face it, we're all now on the front line of something, and we're all needing that bit of support and input, and we are going to be sending out some links to places where you can get more information on the topics that we have been talking about tonight, and we'll include details of this book, Stillness in the Storm, 7 Tools for Coping with Fear and Uncertainty, along with some other websites that you can take a look at. But Judy, we've come to a point where, again, we have been talking about this connecting to that, the core of ourselves, the still point within ourselves. And it would be lovely if we could just return back to an experience of what it is that we've been talking about. And again, if you could speak for us the words that reflect your own inner dialogue and experience, then we can join together and get a sense of what it is that we've been talking about during the course of this session. That would be great, Judy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Philippa. And I love Sarah's book. I can't wait to get a copy. So we've heard a lot. We've been listening, and I'm sure as we've been talking, those who are with us have been having their own thoughts swirling around their heads. So when we sit in meditation, we sit quietly, keep the spine straight, and we allow ourselves to become quiet. And it starts with being quiet on the outside. So whatever's going on around you, whatever little dings and noises go on your phone, whatever goes on outside your window, the fireworks, etc., you notice that, and then you let it go. And so you go from being quiet to being still. So you let all the thoughts and all the concerns, your concern about time, your concern about your schedule, whatever is pulling, because when we move into this inner space, we want to be without pulls. So turn your attention first to your breath and notice how it's quietly supporting you in the background. Moving out, moving in. And just add the thought of peace to your breath so that every time you breathe, you're breathing in peace. And invite the mind to quiet. And invite the heart to be still. And take your attention inside to the place behind the eyes, sometimes called the seat of the soul. And it's like you're in a little boat. You're traveling inside. And so have complete trust that whatever else is around you, you're going home. So allow the focus of your attention to remain steady in this place behind the eyes. And make your eyes silent so nothing pulls your vision. Make your ears silent so nothing that you hear pulls your attention. Make your mind silent so that nothing pulls your mind. If any thought comes in, acknowledge it and let it go. If any memory comes in, release that memory with love and return to the still place behind the eyes. And you move along with the certainty that beyond whatever storms there are outside, whatever storms there are inside, that the soul, the true self, the one you have always been, is love. Love for the self, love for others. So we merge that feeling of love, that feeling of trust, and hold the deep thought that you are love, you are safe, you are going to be okay, and everything will be okay. And then as you move back out of the deepest part of yourself, hold on to that knowing that you are love, you are safe, and everything is going to be okay.
Thank you, Judy. You've given us some lovely seed thoughts there to take away with us. The thought that we are love, we are safe, and that everything is going to be okay. And these kind of thoughts can become like thoughts that we carry with us, and seed thoughts that we can return to whenever we want. Thank you so much for that. And we thought we would set a little practice for you to try out on your own at home, a practice to be doing before we have our next session. And this is to do exactly as Judy has done in our meditation this evening, is to find a quality that you really identify with for yourself, whether that be a heart connection, whether it be a quality of kindness, a quality of compassion, a quality of loyalty, but really work with that one quality and notice to what extent you see that same quality in other people. Because of course, when we bring something into our conscious awareness, we become more aware of it in the world around us. So we're not only noticing it in ourselves, but we're seeing how it shows up in other people, how it shows up in the situations that we encounter as we journey through this world and this time that we're all living in. So time is there. I'm afraid we have to close our conversation for today. It's very much just the first conversation in a series of 6 conversations, 5 more to come. So we've made a great start, and I really feel that we have touched in very deeply to this quality of experience that is available and accessible to all of us. So I'd like to thank both our guides on this journey for this session, to Sarah Eaggar and Judy Rodgers. You've shared so much from your heart and from your experience. It's been such a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you, Philippa.
Thank you. And of course, our next session will be on November the 19th. So mark that in your diary now. It'll be at the same time. And we're going to be taking up the topic of transcending the challenges of a world in transition. So journey well with your quality, feel it in yourself, notice it in others. And I shall look forward to being with you again on the 19th of November. And until then, keep safe, take good care. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much, Philippa, Sarah, and Judy, for delivering such a wonderful, meaningful, and beautiful program. Thank you so much to Hilal for bringing such an amazing opportunity our way. And a huge thank you goes to a person who orchestrated the whole series for us, Margaret Barron, who also have been studying Raja Yoga meditation with Brahma Kumaris University for 24 years. Thank you to all participants. We hope the program was worth of your time, and we're looking forward to seeing you again at our next session on November 19th at the same time. And again, it will be transcending the challenges of a world in transition. Have a great day, evening, and night, everyone. Goodbye.